Alright guys, so you are welcome back to this AWS training, and we're going to continue with the Ec2 instance. In the last class we held, we installed a couple of Windows servers. To be specific, we installed Windows Server 2016 in the AWS, and we were able to use Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP, that uses port number 3389 to make a remote connection to the server in the AWS. And so today we are going to focus on Linux servers. We are going to install Linux machines in the AWS, and we're going to be using either Windows command prompts or Windows PowerShell, as well as seeing how we can use the SSH utility like Putty or Terraterm to make a CLI connection to the Linux machine in the AWS cloud. Apart from that, we are going to also see how we can use the AWS CLI, which is command line interface. It's actually an utility we need to install on a Windows machine, Mac or Linux. And this utility is going to help us to manage all the AWS resources from the CLI point of view. You could be creating an Ec2 instance from AWS CLI from your Windows command prompt. And then instead of using the console, as you could see through this interface. So I'm actually logged into my AWS management console, but then you could also do whatever we do in this console from a CLI point of view. Alright, so let's jump on to creating an Ec2 instance. This time around, we'll be focusing on Linux operating system. So if you're into your AWS management console, you just want to get to this Ec2 instance, just type Ec2 in the search, and you're going to see a link, which is this first one here, virtual servers in the cloud. So I'm clicking on Ec2. Remember that we are going to focus on Linux servers, so we're creating a Linux server. We've done a couple of demos in Windows Server installation configuration. So we'll come down under instances here, and we're going to click on instances new. So you can see I don't have any instance or any virtual server running at the moment. I've terminated or deleted all the servers I've created earlier. At the top right hand side, you see launch instances. So I'm going to click on launch instances, and the launch instances wizard pops up and is asking me for the name of the instance that I want to create. I'm going to name it RedHat server because that is the operating system that I want to install. And we'll come down here, is asking us to specify the operating system that I want to install. In this case, I'm going to just type Linux. It could also be Windows or Mac OS X. So I'll type Linux in the box and just hit the enter key. It's going to give me flavors of Linux distribution. We could go ahead and install the AWS Linux. That is Amazon Linux, but I want to install RedHat Linux. So you have to be careful here on which type of RedHat you're installing. You have to make sure that you are selecting the RedHat Linux 8, which has free tier eligible by the side. Otherwise, if you select the one below, you are going to be charged for that operating system. So the free tier eligible, make sure that we are still within the ambit of free tier, and we're not going to be charged for using this operating system. So click on select here, and once that is selected, we'll be able to move ahead. So the free tier eligible Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 is already selected. We're going to come down here and make sure that we select T2 micro, which means we are going to get 1 CPU and 1 gig of RAM. So if you are not on T2 micro, please click on the drop down here and select T2 micro. And you can create a key pair if you don't have an existing key pair. I have a couple of key pairs here because I've created a couple of machines or servers here in the AWS. Otherwise, if you don't have a key pair, all you need to do is just to click on create key pair and give the key pair a name and click on create key pair. So create new key pair, Then just give a name, any name of your choice, and then you scroll down at the bottom. You're going to see create key pair. I'm going to cancel it because I already have existing key pairs. So I'm going to drop down here and I'm going to select Linux servers, which is the key pair I used for the previous Linux servers I've created in the AWS. That's pretty much what we need to do here. And so if I scroll down, we're going to create a new security group, and we're going to allow SSH traffic from anywhere in the internet. So you can see source is anywhere. The SSH, by the way, stands for secure shell and is a secure way of gaining access to a remote server that is sitting elsewhere. So if SSH is not allowed, then it means that we are not going to be able to access or log into this server to manage it. Can also go ahead and allow HTTPS. We never going to allow HTTP because it's not secure connection. So we're allowing HTTPS and SSH from anywhere. We could be specific on where we're allowing these things from and allow a specific IP address to only access this Linux machine in the AWS through either SSH connection or HTTPS connection. We just allow it for everywhere, anywhere this time around. I'll just scroll down to the bottom and there's nothing else to change here, and just click on launch instance. Now hopefully this instance creation is not going to take a lot of time. Successfully initiated launch of instance. That is good news. So we can come back to instances. Before now we had nothing here, and we'll still have nothing here, but we'll just click on refresh button at the top. You see that we have an instance called RedHat server. This instance, the state is still pending because it's still being created. All right. So once the creation of this instance finishes, you can see the instance state is now running. All right. So that is quite fast, and status is still initializing. And so once it finishes initializing, we can now make a connection to this instance using SSH connection. Either we use Putty or we use Windows command prompts. And at the end of this connection, we've been able to successfully connect to the Ec2 instance running Red Hat Linux. We'll now go ahead to AWS CLI, which is AWS command line interface. We're going to download the CLI and install it on our machine, and we'll be able to create Ec2 instances or do anything that relates to AWS management from the CLI point of view without having to come to this interface using a GUI, which is graphical user interface. So once again, we'll try to refresh the screen to see instance is still initializing. All right, so just have to hold on one more time. All right, so you can see that this instance has been successfully created, and you could see that the checks have been passed. All right, so now it's time for us to make a connection to the server. So we could log into the server and do a couple of tasks, probably do some installation of software, etc., etc. On the instance ID here, click on the instance ID itself, and we're going to see a couple of options. First off, we're going to see the public IP address that is allocated to this virtual server in AWS. We're also going to see the private IP address of this server, as well as the public IPv4 DNS. All right, so we could go to instance state. We could decide to stop this machine from running. Could also decide to restart it or terminate the instance, which means we get it deleted. But what we want to look at now is the connect. So if I click on connect, we know that we can do instance connect using EC2. And if I do that, I click on connect, it should be able to give me a CLI access to the machine. But again, that's there was a problem connecting to your instance. Okay, so sometimes you might have issues with using the CLI on the web, depending on what is allowed through the firewall. So we might have to go to the firewall and do some checks, and then come back or connect using EC2 instance connect, which is going to open up a CLI, which is command line interface on a browser for us. Could also connect using session manager. Could also connect using EC2 serial console. What I want to do in this demo is to use SSH client. So click on SSH client in the middle here, and we're going to see how we are going to connect to this server. Well, a couple of ways to do this. We could copy SSH-interface. This is ID, and then we are logging in as Linux servers.pem, which is the key pair that I already have in my system. This key pair is created for the first Linux server that I've created before today, which I've also deleted. I also showed you how to create a key pair when you are creating your virtual machine. Alright, so what we're going to do, we can actually copy the whole of this command here and open our Windows command prompt and paste this command inside the command prompt. And once this command is pasted in the command prompt, we're going to hit the enter key, and that's it. Now make sure that when you open your Windows command prompt, you navigate to where the key file that you downloaded, which is the key pair you downloaded earlier, where that key pair is located. In my own case is located in downloads. So I'm going to do CD downloads to get into the download folder. And if I do directory and hit enter key, you see I have a couple of stuff in my download folder, and one of those things I have in the download folder is a file named linuxserver.pem. Okay, so it might be quite a hassle trying to locate that file because I have a couple of files in my downloads. Otherwise, a file called linuxservers.pem, that is PEM, should be located here. Alright, so having said that, I could go ahead now and paste the command that I copied from the AWS. So going to paste the command. Alright, so I have to copy it again, and once again go to the command prompt and try to paste it. Alright, so I do well to remove this semicolon and remove this as well, and hit the enter key, and we should be able to just type yes. We should be able to have access to our Ec2 instance. So I'm actually inside the Linux machine, so you could see that I logged in as Ec2 user, which is the default username for Linux machine, and at this IP address 172.31.89.11. So I could do a couple of commands like who am I to check what account I use, and this is my username, which is Ec2 user. And I could also check the name of the computer by typing host name, and you could see that my host name is IP- whatever the IP address is .internal. Alright, so I'm inside this machine for my Windows command prompt, and I could manage the machine. I could do sudo commands, I could do yum because this is a RedHat Linux server, so I could use commands like yum install followed by whatever application I want to install. And you notice that if I do if config, it's not going to work because network tool is not installed by default. So could do yum install net tools. Well, to do that, we have to start with sudo. So sudo yum install. Now I'm going to say yes to all. So I'm going to put net tools, which is the name of what we want to install. I'll hit the enter key, and the installation should be completed in no time. Alright, so Red Hat Linux 8 is trying to download networking tools so that I'll be able to do ifconfig command to see the network, the IP address assigned to this machine. Alright, so just hold. This wouldn't take time to finish installing, but I could be able to access this virtual server in AWS from my Windows command prompt. Wow, we have an error, unable to find a match. Net tools. I think there should be a dash between the net and tools, and let's do the command again and see what happens. All right, so that's it. So it's complete. You can see here installed NetTools 2.0.52. And so if I go ahead now and do ifconfig, I should be able to see my IP address details. So 172.31.89.11, that's the private IP address allocated to this machine. Well, this is how to do it from the Windows command prompt. But you might want to do it another way. If I want to use Putty, you can also use Terratem, depends on whichever application you have. You can use Hyperterminal, Terratem, Putty, Secure CRT. Apart from Secure CRT, other tools are free. So just go online and type Putty and get it downloaded into your system. Now here, we are going to connect by putting the IP address or host name of the machine we want to connect to. And we are using SSH, which uses port number 22. So SSH stands for Secure Shell. All right, so let's go back to this EC2 management console, and we're going to copy our host name. So you can see at EC2. So after that at, copy everything else. Copy. And we're going to Putty and put the host name of the machine we want to connect to, which we'll just copy it, paste. And what we need to do is go to data, and then under data we need to supply the username. Remember, username is EC2 user. Control C. All right. So open up the Putty. So EC2 user, and then under SSH you can go to authentication, and then we are to browse to our private key, but then we have not even generated the private key to begin with. So what we're going to do is pull out another tool called Puttygen. So I have Puttygen here. Already I have it downloaded. You can go online in Google search, just type Puttygen, that is Putty key generator, and it should take you to a link where you get this guy downloaded. So here I think I have the link still open here, and you could see here I downloaded the one for 64 bits, that is puttygen.exe. So you need this Puttygen, and what we're going to do is to load a key file. Well, the whole explanation of what we are trying to do is this. On the EC2, when we are creating the EC2, we were asked to put a key pair. Okay, so we created a key pair. So if I go to EC2 instance, EC2 instance, just hold on. This is my EC2. Let's just search for it for quick access. So if I go to my EC2, you're going to see during the creation of an EC2, if I go to launch instance, you are going to see that we will be provided with the opportunity to create a key pair. As a matter of fact, you can see key pairs that I already have. So if I click on these key pairs, I have a couple of key pairs, but the one I choose to use now is Linux servers. Okay, so once this key pair is created, automatically it gets downloaded into our download folder or whatever directory that your download goes to. So if I go to file location, you can see that inside my laptop I have a file called linuxservers.pem. all right, So let me go back to the Putty key generator, and we're going to load this file that is called Linux servers.pem by launching the Putty key generator and clicking on load, and then get to the download location and search for, let me just look for all files, and we're going to search for letter L, which is Linux. So that's it, Linux servers.pem. We're going to open that file. Successfully imported the foreign key. Alright, click on OK, and now we are going to save this guide. So click on save private key. Are you sure you want to save? Yeah. Where do you want to save it? Let's save it in pictures. I'm going to name it my private key. Alright, whatever name you want to give it, make sure that it's on Putty private key format, which is .ppk, and then hit on the save button, and so we can close this guide. Alright, so now we'll bring up the Putty itself, and you notice that under what is it called, under session, we already have put the host name, or the IP address is on SSH, which is TCP port 22, and I've gone under data to put the username that we want to use, and now come under SSH, we are going to authentication, and now we're going to browse to our picture where we saved the file my private key. Open it up, and then click on open, and we should be inside this Ec2 instance. So we can say accept, and so authenticated successfully, and we have logged in into the machine, and so we could do who am I, and once again we are logged in as Ec2 user. Could do host name, we're going to say the computer name, can do ifconfig, and we can see the IP address details 172.168.9.11, and can do a host of other commands here. So we could do pwd to see our working directory. So you can see I'm home Ec2 user, so I'm in the home directory of this machine. And that's how to access the Linux machine, either using Putty, Terraterm, Hyperterminal, or using your Windows command line, command prompt. Now, the next thing we have to do now is to show you how to use AWS CLI. AWS CLI is a command line tool that is used to manage your AWS resources. Once again, we are in the AWS Management Console, which is the GUI, the graphical user interface. And this way we're able to create our Ec2 instances, both Windows instances and this time around Linux instances. We could also use AWS CLI to manage all of this, create instances, either Windows or Linux, but then we'll be using commands to do that instead of using the console. Alright, so that's what AWS CLI does. And so we're going to end this tutorial here, and then in the next one we're going to jump into the AWS CLI and get it installed for Windows 10 machine, and then from the AWS CLI we'll set it up, and then we'll go ahead to create an Ec2 instance from the CLI.